Well, good afternoon, I can officially say to everyone. And thank you for coming today, and thank you for honoring the request so we can socially adjust distance everyone and make it a little bit more productive so we can get as many people as possible. I said earlier when I walked in, I said, usually I'd say it's nice to see some familiar faces. But everybody looks familiar because everyone kind of looks the same these days. But welcome again. What I'd like to do before we begin is to say my go-to prayer, if you will, for any time that myself or all of us are in a challenging time. So you bow your head and take your heads off. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. O Lord, please grant us the serenity to accept those things we cannot change, but the courage to change those things we can, and most importantly, the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. And it's in that spirit of that prayer that we are having these meetings, and how we ultimately decided to go with a full 5-day opening of school. We'll talk a little bit about how we came to that conclusion and where we think it's best for our students. But I'll preface it by saying a couple things. We are a bunch of school teachers. We are not infectious disease experts. This is my 42nd year of education. Maybe it started 43rd out. And I thought I've seen everything. Apparently I have not. When we were required to close down in March of last year, I was extraordinarily proud of the efforts that our teachers did in providing not only quality instruction, but instruction that was new content when we move forward. There were glitches, and there are some things that we'll talk about today that we hope to smooth those things out if we need to do it. But the point is that this was something that we faced that we had never faced before. And some of you have heard me make this comment, but it really rang true. When I'm ever asked by friends or relatives, because I've hired a lot of people over the years, and they said, what's the number one quality or characteristic you look for when you hire someone? I said, it's very easy, sometimes hard to determine, but I look for people with a good attitude. Because we never know what's going to happen, and none of us anticipated a pandemic. And the fact that we were fortunate, you were fortunate, and your kids were fortunate with having an overwhelming number of faculty and staff that had a good attitude, we figured it out. And we figured it out, I think, remarkably well. And I've said this before, the reason I know that is because the compliments and the complaints were about the same thing. In essence, thank you for having new instruction, for moving things along, not just doing review and enhancement, which some of our schools had decided to do, but also complaints, okay, this is overwhelming, it's hard to keep track of the kids. And one of the things I certainly had empathized, even with my own 2 children, with my 5 grandchildren, how difficult it was for you to be your children's personal assistants, because that's what it kind of meant. And we'll talk a little bit about our plan, should that become necessary, hopefully not, but should that become necessary, how we will hopefully make that a smoother process for you and help you to do that. But today is really about the starting of school face-to-face. As you know, the SED came out with the guidelines for us and gave us about a week's time in order to put together our plan. And they required all of us to have 3 parts of that plan: that face-to-face instruction, complete remote instruction like we were last spring, and then some sort of hybrid. Probably less known is there is a state organization called SORUS, and that stands for State Office of religious and independent schools. That guidance came out on Wednesday, the 29th of July, with a requirement to have it turned in by Friday, the 31st. So I don't say that to disparage the state because, again, it's new to them. And it requires patience, and it required all of us to get a little bit heroic about how we were going about this. We all knew that somehow we had to look at what are the possibilities in being able to put this together. The conclusions that we came to is that, one, we are a small school. We are a school that was built in 1954, I believe, during the baby boom generation, happened to be the year I was born, where they were building schools faster than they had room for kids. We have a school that was built when they used to put 30, 35 kids in a classroom. Of course, my first desk were the ones on the wooden runner with, the desk was the kid's seat in front of you. We don't have those, but we still have those ungodly wooden seats that date back to my going to school. We looked at that, we looked at our square footage, we looked at the kind of relationship we have with our parents. We talk about we're a family school and organization, but you've heard me say numerous times, it really is here. And because of that confidence that we have, that we can work with parents and work with you in helping your individual situation with every child. We also have one class per grade level, as opposed to multiple, first grade class and third grade class. So these were a variety of factors that we looked into when we were looking at this. We also had to look at exactly where we are in the state and more particularly in Western New York, because as you know, whatever we decide, it could at any time be preempted by the governor. And we are prepared if that situation comes. We hope that it is not. Right now, the best information that we have, and it does change. I mean, we all know that at one time masks were not necessary or even necessarily harmful. Now we are all to wear masks if we cannot socially distance. I do think the current wisdom is strong and solid that wearing masks does dramatically reduce the possibility of transmission between folks. And it is relatively, for most people, not all, but for most people, more of an inconvenience and an awkwardness than it is a true inhibitor to an education. We also feel strongly that we went 4 months last year in the spring with not having face-to-face instruction. We know as educators that instruction is well beyond just reading, writing, and arithmetic. It is about socialization. These are the formative years of children. We believe and hope that part of the reason that you send your kids to us is that there is a moral aspect, a spiritual aspect to your child as during these formative years. And it's important that education not only be face-to-face, but that it is an integral, that spirituality is an integral part of that upbringing and importance to do that. We also know that our parents have high expectations for their children, both academically, behaviorally, and spiritually, and that is, we believe, best served with children here. Having said all that, this plan is not perfect. I don't know of a perfect plan. I don't know of anyone who's implementing their plan that it isn't without a degree of controversy. There is probably as many opinions on what is the best course that we should follow as there are families with us. But at some point, decisions have to be made and we have to move forward. I will tell you that, and I've said this before about your children when we were doing things like, preparing for, the unthinkable of an active shooter or any of those things, that I and the faculty and staff here would do anything to save your children's lives. That remains as we prepare for this year. I would send my 5 grandchildren to Nativity if they live closer. And I would believe that they are as healthy and safe as any of us can be. There is a risk to life every day. There is a risk when they get on the bus or get in the car just to come to school and go home every day. So right now, when we look at Western New York, when we look at the state, we're at about a 0.6% infection. We're a little bit higher in Western New York right now, but one of the interesting things is that we know where the spike came from the Eden Valley growers and migrant workers that had come through there. And what's significant about that is not that it's migrant workers or that, is that they are essentially a cohort, and that the community tracing was pretty easy because they were a community that pretty much stuck together in their travels, and so it was immediately and rather quickly contained. That's pertinent to us because we are that small school. We have 1 grade level per class, and we are well cohorted just naturally the way we do things. And so with that, we believe that we can, if somebody is suspected of being infected, or actually is, or a member of the family is, that we can very quickly, with the help of the health department, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we can rather quickly contain that. We also know the statistics are very much in your child's favor as far as the chances of serious illness. Doesn't mean it can't happen. I mean, you know, people can have sometimes unusual reactions to different things, but you got to go with the masses and the statistics. And generally speaking, children are right now the wisdom, and I always say that because it changes, that they are generally not at as high a risk as, say, I am. And they are generally not as active as spreaders as perhaps I am or other folks. So I will leave you with a thought before I move on, is that to make this enterprise work the way we hope it is, we will do our best here, and we'll talk more about exactly what that is. But we also ask that you do your best as well, because if contact tracing becomes a reality, they're going to go to the families and see, you know, where you've been. So for all of us to be as healthy as possible, we all need to do our part, both in school and out of school. So we have the 3 models, as I said, in school, hybrid, and remote. We have made the decision that we will go with a in school, and we will do that for as long as it is safe, or until the governor decides otherwise, if that is the case. One of the proactive things that you can do right now, and we will, everything that we talk about, we are taping it, but we will also put it out there, is if you don't have a Google account, you should do so, a free Google account. And the reason I say that is if we need to go remote again, then in order to try and make the job easier for you, because you recognize that trying to keep a track of all your child's work, particularly if you have more than 1 child in school, that we can do it through Google Classroom, Google Docs, a whole Google suite that we can do this. So primarily we Zoomed last year, but we will be training our teachers in the first few days on how to use Google Classroom and the other Google products. I'm not getting a kickback from them, but it's just a way to help make it manage your end of it so that you can look and see, you know, where your 3rd grader is, and deadline dates, what's that, and also your 5th grader, and so on. So it was a little cumbersome, I know, to go to each of the teachers' pages and try and deal with that. So we hope that that will help matters out. Secondly, the other thing I would like to just plant a seed is and I hesitate to use the term regulation, because regulation by definition means that it's gone through a government process and debate and rules. Much of what we're operating at is the mandates, I guess. They're governor or health department mandates that haven't necessarily gone through that. I get why. You can't spend months in meetings trying to figure out what to do when you need immediate action. But it's important to know that much of what we get and what we hear is to distinguish what is a mandate and what is a guideline. And much of what we get is really a guideline. In our plan, and a couple of people have asked me, has it been approved? And the answer to that is yes, to the extent that it hasn't been disapproved. From what my understanding is, when we submit, and we have to submit to the State Education Department, and we had to submit to the Erie County Health Department. And they are reviewed. And if there are any significant pieces that are missing, or if they, I don't know, a red flag or something goes up, you are then notified. And I do have some colleagues that have been notified. We have not, and I'm not anticipating it because it's a pretty thorough plan. So in that sense, it's approved, but they don't put a stamp on it and say it's approved and send it off, mostly because they understandably can't know what every school and what the situation is like. So at this point, we think that most of our classes can provide 6 feet of distance for the better part of the instruction. Not all. And we will sometimes bring kids together. The example I use, if we're dissecting a frog and the teachers, you're going to have kids gather around and they will have masks, and we will keep that duration limited. Maybe not perhaps the same way that you would under normal, typical circumstances. But we will do that. When we are passing in the hallways, coming in the morning, at the end of the day, during classes, we will have kids wear masks. I have also spent nearly $15,000 on polycarbonate partitions as an extra layer of security, particularly for those areas where, we have 17, 18, 19 kids in a classroom, and we may need to rotate kids through there. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you have a heightened concern for your child, then please let us know, and we can make sure that we have that polycarbonate shield around the desk. We'll have enough that we can spread that around. But if you have a particular concern and you want that added safety, then we will do what we can to certainly accommodate that. But we are using it in areas where we think that it will be beneficial. We will ventilate the rooms as best we can, even in the cold weather. I've told our teachers that we live in the North Country. There's no reasons that kids can't go outside during the winter time, barring, 30-mile-an-hour winds and 10 below zero. But, I have a place in the Adirondacks, and I remember a superintendent came down and we were closing schools because it was cold. And he said, my God, we close school every time and drop below zero. He said, we'd hardly ever be in school. We won't be insane about it, but I do think that kids will need to be outside, and they need that opportunity to run around. So let me just give you quickly, as best we can. I talked about it, and Hannah will talk a little bit more about the importance of cohorting our kids and keeping them together. But the other take-home message I think I really want you to know, and I had a faculty meeting this summer, and I will need to reiterate it with the teachers as well, because it's very easy to slip into old habits. Just because, and I told them this when we met a couple weeks ago, just because kids are being dropped off by buses or cars at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're being picked up at the end of the day at the normal dismissal time. It's easy, and as they were resetting up their rooms, some had a habit of just sort of resetting it up the way they would normally do. And I know myself, and I know Hannah had to go in and say, whoa, wait a minute, especially for the young ones, the carpet's on the floor and they'd have circle time and stuff. We're not doing that. And we have to make our rooms more Spartan. And the delivery instruction is going to be different. And I'm going to be very honest with you. The best instruction to your children is under normal conditions and typical things with rooms set up the way they have all. The least desirable way of providing instruction is entirely remote. While we did it, I think, exceptionally well compared to other people, that's still, particularly for these kids in these formative years, not the best way for them to learn. So we are going to find a happy medium in that. And I'll give you some examples. Our teacher aides in the younger classes are going to have to step it up a little bit because we're going to separate those kids. You might take 8 kids off and do an activity. The gym is going to become a classroom space. It could be as much as 4 spaces in each of the corners. We will be utilizing the cafeteria for other things than just eating lunch. We have other spaces. The Faith Formation has moved their offices over to the rectory. The library and cafeteria room are used differently. And the special areas that your kids would normally do, such as Spanish, technology, library, art, music, health, religion, is going to be delivered in different ways. And part of the reason is that we are assigning those teachers, the main core teachers, English, social studies, math, and science, in the upper grade levels, but the classroom teacher will all have teacher partners, and we're utilizing our special teachers to be those teacher partners. So if we need to divide a class to reduce the density, we will do that through our teacher partners. I have to, by New York State law, labor law, provide a duty-free lunch for all our teachers, in which case we'll utilize, I point to Mrs. Dimer over there because she's one of our teachers and one of our specials, and she's heard me say that we will use those teachers in order to free up our other teachers so I can not get in trouble with the New York State Labor Department, which I have no intention to do. So the kind of specials that your children get might be a little bit sporadic. It is certainly not going to be at the same number of intensity as you would have in the past. But again, when that bothers me, and it does, I think about, well, what happened when we were closed down? I mean, I know Annie, you did a nice job, and we tried to integrate some of those things in, but it still wasn't the same. So if the teacher partner for a class happens to be our Spanish teacher, they might get some Spanish. If it's art, we'll do some art, and we're going to try and keep it as normal as possible, but I want to make it eminently clear to you, and to help us to prepare your children, we will do this when they come in the first few days of school, to let them know that the classrooms are going to look a little different, and the instruction from their own teacher will be pretty much the same. But the other things that occur is going to be driven by, quite frankly, how we can free up teachers to have lunch, and if we need to divide up a class in order to reduce density, if there's an issue with that. We are also doing a variety of things to limit the movement around the school, which includes, and this is the hard part, because one of the things I took a great deal of pride in, and it existed before I came here as well, is that the level of parent participation in the school is incredible. And you've heard me say enough times, we could not survive without your participation. just, you know, from cafeteria monitors to the fundraising both in school and outside school, the room parents and all of those things that we've become so dependent on. We're not going to eliminate all of that, but we are certainly going to dramatically reduce it. And we do this because we want to preserve the integrity of cohorting. And the more traffic we have in and out of school jeopardizes that. And that becomes very important. There's a reason that the doors are closed down here and the gates are across. And I just want to be honest with you, because we, you know, normally I'd have you in here, and if you want to go down to your rooms or, you know, go up or bring your kids in with you at the meeting, we would welcome that. But times are different. The cafeteria has desks in there now instead of tables, and the cafeteria will be used for lunches, but not at the same density that we had before. We're still working on whether we go to 4 lunches or remain 3, but we're trying to rotational, so if a class has to eat lunch in their classroom, they might eat lunch in a classroom 2 days a week, and 3 days a week they're down in the cafeteria. But again, it's going to be adjustment on the students because they're going to be in the, you know, they're going to be sitting this far apart from each other. So it's going to look and feel differently for them, and mobility. We are adjusting time schedules so that we all saw the horror story or the pictures in Atlanta with the hallways jammed with kids with no mask on, and oh my God, you know, we're all fearful. That's not going to happen. We can easily adjust times so that we have limited number of kids in the hallway and going back and forth. And again, the importance of that is to keep the integrity of the cohort. So if there isn't an issue, we can, the health department can deal with it rather quickly. Because it's not my intention that if we have, God forbid, we have a COVID positive case in school, that we're not going to hit the panic button and say, okay, we got to shut down. We'll work individually with you if you have individual concerns and deal with that, and we will communicate as best we can under circumstance, including the HIPAA laws. But most parents are pretty cooperative and will try and be as accurate about the information as we can. So that is the reason for all that sort of restrictive movement, and we're asking that if you need to come into school, that you call ahead and make an appointment, if you will. Just let us know so we come what the purpose is and how we can do that. Not saying you can't come into school, not saying you can't meet with the teacher, but it won't be as free-flowing as it was before when people come. Do you mind if I just run up and see Mrs. Gehring, that sort of thing? The one concession we made is with the preschoolers and the kindergarten. Most schools are not allowing parents in the school at all, particularly for the drop-off and pickup. We know, or are at least anticipating, that we're going to have a lot more car drop-offs than before. Probably less kids taking a bus than before. You are asked to drop the kids off and not to come into school with them. The exception, as I said, is with the preschool and the kindergarten, and we'll make adjustments with that as the year goes along. But there'll be a specific method for coming in, what door you come in. It'll be a one-way traffic in one door and out the other door when we do that. We normally have that drop-off day, that's the Tuesday right after Labor Day. We are not having school drop-off day for the older students, but up to kindergarten and preschool. It's my understanding that many of you, if there's any of the parents here, have been notified. If not, you will be on how you're going to do that. For the older kids, if they've got too much, don't give them all in one day. Spread it out over the 3 days, the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Because most of those days, quite frankly, are going to be sort of reacclimating, training kids. We are planning on taking kids over to church, but that whole procedure is changing. And we have to meet the requirements that Father Ron has put in for church. He wants to keep it consistent with the way it's run each and every weekend and for daily mass as well. So, you know, we understand that that's going to take a little bit of teaching of the kids. We know that they can do no wrong, and don't go home and tell your kids this, please, but they can't do anything wrong in those first few days, because it is a teaching learning experience for them as well as for us and how we operate under those conditions. I mentioned about faith formation is moved over to rectory. We'll use other rooms that we have in a school if we need to in order to provide that kind of distance. And just know that we will take many, many breaks. We will also be very sensitive to your child's mass tolerance. If they're struggling with it, and we can tell, we will help them out. But this is far better, in my judgment, that to provide the instruction this way, even though it's not as good as it would be, if everything was okay. The bottom line, I guess I want to say, with a less than 1%, almost half of that, 0.6, and hopefully it continues to trend. If we don't open up now, and this is rhetorical, so I'm not expecting an answer, but you can think, when do we? Because next year, let's say this is September next year, we may very well have an effective vaccine, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go away. I mean, we have vaccines. I will be getting my flu shot here soon. Doesn't mean that we don't get the flu. So no, it's not anything necessarily that it's going to be cured. Hopefully it will. Almost like we eradicate polio and what kind of shots? Smallpox, yeah. I mean, it's rare, but they still get chickenpox, smallpox, still happens. But so hopefully that's where we're heading. But until then, we have to find a way to effectively work with this. So I don't want to use up all the time because I know you're probably sitting on a lot of questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Hannah, who is our nurse. For those that are new to our school, is our school nurse, and she is on the COVID team with me and is our COVID coordinator. And she'll speak to a little bit about, from a medical standpoint, how it works. Yeah, but it's at the bottom of it.
Okay, while that dries, I'm not going to put my papers there. So I've already developed some bad habits. So here's one thing that I'm going to plan to teach your children. When you take your mask off, you fold it inside out. We're going to keep it like that. I did not bring my mask box, but that's one thing that we're asking your children to have this year. And each teacher might do it a little bit different. But one suggestion was to have an empty pencil box that when you do take your mask break, you can put your folded mask in a clean area, so it's not hanging around your neck, and it's not hanging on your arm, and it's not on the floor. So, where to start, guys? I've been in COVID webinars since February. Over break, I maintained every competency I could with it. I watched everything I could. I have read everything that's come out 4 times, if not more. The guidance has changed every week. We're staying up to date on it the best we can. For those that don't know, I'm the nurse coordinator for Clarence Schools. So I'm following all the policies that New York State has put down. I prefer the Clarence policies because I've helped develop them. Nativity does things a touch different just because we're different from Clarence Schools. We have this great opportunity, being so small, to be able to be in our classrooms and not have to use a hybrid plan. With that, the staff and the students at Nativity are my priority all the time. I am not going to put anyone in an unsafe situation. The teachers have been wonderful of coming to me and asking questions and what can we do and does this work? And I give them the best guidance I can. I'm not a teacher, so I say the education part's on you. I'm just here to help do the safety part. And they've got it. They know what they're doing. If 6 feet away is good, wearing a mask and being 6 feet away is better. Being behind a partition, wearing a mask 6 feet away would be the best. We're doing what we can with what we've got, and I'm going to do for whatever best interest is. We're going to try and make that happen. The cohort idea is that the same group of kids stay together throughout the day, and those kids can touch the same objects. They're still going to have their masks on. I'm not saying that we're going to like go willy-nilly here, but if there's a group of 4 kids in preschool who are all going to play with the blocks together, but then after those kids play with those blocks, the blocks are put away and they'll be cleaned at the end of the day. No one else touches those blocks. So now when the next group comes, they have their own blocks. So I'm really trying to keep things in a very small group or individualized. For example, Play-Doh. I'm not going to have that be in a group setting. Each kid is going to get their own thing of Play-Doh, and that's going to be their Play-Doh that they use every day, or whoever the teacher uses it. For the big kids, we're going to space as much as we can. We're going to mask as much as we can with good breaks. For example, when we're sitting here like this, I appreciate all of you having your masks on. That's wonderful. Would they have the opportunity to pull down? And so do you. If you need a mask break, feel free to pull down or put it inside out and hold it if you need to. Now would be a great opportunity for a teacher to say, guys, how about the first row and the third row and the fifth row? Take your mask break now. So now that first row is going to be more than 6 feet from the third row. So I'm giving you a lot of open air spaces. Those are the type of policies that I'm implementing. They're thought out. I am always open to suggestion. If your kid comes home and says, yep, so we did this today, and you're like, you did what? Just email me, call me, email the teacher, call the teacher, and just say, the kid said this. Is this how it happened? My idea to help this might be. We're not perfect. So if there's suggestions, please send them in. I'm always happy to hear them. What else? Sick kids.
Isolation.
Okay. I do have an isolation room. I have a space where a student who does not feel well is going to be separated out of my clean area office. My office is still my office. I'm still doing Band-Aids. I am still seeing kids who have chronic medical problems. I am still coming into, I hope they'll draw me pictures. So I want my office to be my normal office. When a kid doesn't feel well though, if they have COVID symptoms, and unfortunately, they have increased the number of COVID symptoms to just about everything. It's a headache, it's a sore throat, it's a runny nose, it's a sniffle, it's body aches, it's everything. I'm going to use my professional nursing judgment to, does this child have a chronic condition? Is this something that I need to send the child home for? If it's something that I think they need to go home for, I'll bring them to my isolation room. Isolation room is just the room in front of my office. We've reconfigured that to have a cot in there. I've made it comfortable. I put fun stuff up. And I think I'm not gonna call it isolation room. I can do better than that. And that's where they're gonna hang out until you guys get there to come get them. Unfortunately, right now, the state has made things very clear on how they want kids to come back to school. So I'm just gonna run through some scenarios and then we'll answer some questions on it. So Susie in kindergarten comes to me and she's hot. Take her temperature, she's got a fever. She'll come over to the isolation room, so she's there and out of the clean room. I call you guys, mom and dad come get her. I have a newly developed form that I'm going to write right on it. It says the symptoms noted. So I'll say fever at 1 p.m. The problem is New York State is making you guys go to a doctor every time I send someone home from school. So the doctor then needs to say, yes, this is a COVID symptom. You need to go get a COVID test. this is not a COVID symptom, and it's this instead. Or if you choose not to go get the COVID test because you have that choice, you have that right. If you don't want the COVID test, you do need to stay home for 10 days. So until you get the COVID test results, we would ask that you stay home. And remember how I always did the 24-hour rule after a fever? New York State has increased that to 3 days. So you have to be symptom-free and well, and your symptoms have totally resolved for 3 days. I know it's a lot as a parent. I have the same concerns of when my kids get sick down the street and what am I going to do? We'll work through it together. So the nice thing about this new form is the doctor writes right on it. You know, yes, it's a COVID test. You know, this is that. And then you just give this back to me. If it is a COVID positive, if the COVID test comes back positive, I'm kind of out of the loop now because the test goes directly to Department of Health, and Department of Health takes over on that. So then they will do the contact tracing, and they will call me because I'm the point person, and I can say, yep, Susie in kindergarten was around this cohort in class and had this exposure to them. So an exposure is less than 6 feet for more than 10 minutes, regardless of mask or no mask. So if I tell Department of Health, these are the kids who I think, Department of Health will then contact you. Will that be an entire class wiped out to quarantine? I don't think so, because we're doing all the safety things that we can do. Kids aren't really going to be closer than 6 feet for more than 10 minutes, except for that small little cohort. But even then, we're hoping to not have it be all that long. So that's kind of that. The other thing that was in the plan and that we're going to ask the parents to do is to answer 4 questions every morning before your kids come to school. So it's, have you traveled recently out of New York State to a state that has a high positive rate? Are you feeling well? Has anyone been around anyone who has been positive? And do you have a fever? So this will go on the website. It'll also go on Cougar News every week. And it's just a, if you answer yes, follow this. If you answer no, follow this. So does your child have a fever greater than 100? If yes, stay home, inform the school, rest and recover, call your doctor. If the answer is no to a fever, attend school. So this should be a good decision tree. I am asking that you take your child's temperature every morning before they come to school. I would do it before you get in the car. I wouldn't wait till you're in the parking lot because I know maybe many of you, like I have, you're in the car and the sun's beating down on you and it's 90 degrees. And then you go into a hair salon and they take your temperature and you're 100. You're like, I'm fine, I don't have a fever. So if you do it at home, hopefully we should avoid that. I believe every school district is requiring a mask worn on the bus. So if your child is planning the bus, please know that masks do need to be worn the entire time, but they will be socially distancing also on the bus. If a child forgets a mask, no big deal, we have extras. We not only have great Nativity masks, I also have just regular procedural blue masks too. I have different sizes for the kids, so don't think the preschoolers are going to be wearing giant ones like that.
But we are giving one to every student, so
if they drop them on the floor, no problem. We'll just give them a new one. If you would, please send at least one extra mask, the same way you would with extra clothes. That would be very helpful to me, just so we don't run out very fast. One of my favorite parts of my job is the teaching that I get to do with your kids. So I have done so much great hand washing songs and just great things that I can't wait to get into the classrooms to see your kids, number one. And we're going to do a great health teaching, and I'm excited for that. They're going to know why we have to wear masks, and they're going to know to sing Happy Birthday twice and these other fun songs that I've come up with for hand washing. We're going to hand wash all the time. I've talked to the preschool teachers, especially because, you know, they're right outside my office, so they pop in. And we're going to hand wash when you first come into school. We're going to get squirts. Anytime we pass by a squirter, we're washing hands before lunch, after we come in from recess, and before we come home. Because I don't want to bring any germs that we might have gotten here home to you. So we're hand washing. I've got big plans on that. It's good stuff, guys. I'm good for questions.
Yeah, I think at this point, we'll open it up to questions, and Anna and I will both be here, and we'll answer as best we can, depending on the nature of the question. So we'll turn it over to you.
Just to be clear, are students going to be wearing masks the entire day that they're here other than mask break?
Yes.
Maybe mask holders?
Yes. And depending if you want to buy the lanyards, I don't think our school is going to go that way. We kind of talked about the box just in case. If you like the lanyard, if you're comfortable with the lanyard, you know, my biggest thing for the preschoolers is I don't want them to choke or grab each other. But we can do that in a safe way. So if you're comfortable with that and your student is comfortable with that, I'm happy with that. Yes.
When the kids arrive at school, will there be temperature scans from the teacher, or?
There shouldn't be. I'm hoping that you'll take care of that at home, and then you'll make that decision of, yep, we can still come to school, or no, we're going to stay home. If a teacher says, you know, I don't think this kid looks good, of course they're going to come down to me and I'll assess them. But no, I don't plan to stand by the doors and take anyone's temperature.
And then just secondly on that, let's just say we get all the way to breaks, Christmas break, winter break, third season. If families go away, are you relying on people if they do travel and come back, or what's the policy for the isolation for that?
I am. One of the great things about Nativity School is we're a family together. We're going to figure this out together. I expect honesty from everybody. Of course, if I find out through the grapevine that so-and-so traveled here and that's what it is, I'll call you. I'll call you out on it. I have no trouble doing that. And my request will be, okay, please keep your kids home for 2 weeks.
I'll just say, we'll know.
We find out.
We always do. I mean, just imagine, you know, your kids, they tell us all the time and tell their kids. And it's not like we're checking up on you. And we really, we have always dealt in good faith with our families. And we also know, and Hannah and I have spoken about this, we know your children for the most part. If you're new, it'll take a little bit. We know that there are kids that if they get a sliver in their finger, they'll get a fever. And, you know, Hannah mentioned that she has allowed quite a bit of discretion. And we know kids with chronic situations. So I guess you're comfortable in saying that just, you know, like anything else, you have to apply some common sense. So if we know that this student, you know, is prone to a fever right away, we will still monitor it closely. And if that fever continues and doesn't take the normal protocol, then we would need to do that. But I think it's important, and I think we've always demonstrated that we use common sense and some discretion and information that you give us. I mean, I had the unfortunate occasion going into Roswell Hospital. They're relying, when I walked in there, I mean, they ask you the questions and take your temperature, but they're relying on people being honest. And you know, is somebody going to get by in it? yes, but hopefully the protocols in place will minimize that. Like anything else, it's keeping the masses honest, if you will, because that helps us all, not just the individual, but it helps everyone.
One thing that I just thought of, sorry, just a second. In years past, when a kid gets strep throat, it's been the district policy that we send home that letter that says, someone in the classroom has strep throat, please monitor your kid. For COVID, I am not doing that. It will come from the health department, not from me. I understand the whole contact tracing, but that's not in my job description right now. So if there is a kid who does come back positive, I'm sure you'll hear it's grapevine anyway. But the official paperwork will be from Department of Health, not from me. Go ahead, Mrs.
If you have one child that has a fever at home or sent home with a fever, is that the whole family is going home? Or
No, I've read on that quite a bit. There's been a lot of nurse discussion about that. If your second child is not symptomatic, I don't need to send them home. If you as a parent feels better of, I'm coming to get this one, let me just take them both, sure, no problem. But until your other child gets symptomatic or you get a positive test, because a family member would be a close contact, and then they would need a quarantine. Yes.
Our pediatrician said that they're not seeing any patients in the office with any COVID symptoms. So how would that, I mean, how's that gonna work?
Right.
Send paper.
Yep, so if your student goes home sick, and I recommend calling the doctor, you should call your doctor and say, my daughter got sent home sick today, what should I do? And they'll say, come on in, or if they're not gonna see their patients, you might have to go to urgent care. Or you have that third option of staying home for 10 days or until symptoms are gone.
Or 3 days? What would the difference be between 3 days and 10 days?
If it's suspected COVID.
And can you make that determination?
I could, but that should probably come from your doctor's office. When you call them, they're gonna give you good advice. I work with Dr. Fran Simone from Amherst Peds and Kelly Nab from Williamsville Peds. So we have kind of gone over that. The triage nurse should be giving you better information than, sorry, we're not gonna see you.
So to piggyback on that, you started by saying that the state has included almost everything as a COVID symptom. So our child wakes up and feeling lousy, so we figure out they're proactive and keep them home.
Right.
So then what happens at that point? We're saying that you're sick.
Right.
So then are we required to take them to the doctor's at that point with the COVID test and all of that?
If you're gonna keep them home, which I appreciate very much, see how it goes. If it's like, okay, I'm feeling better 3 hours later, don't call your doctor. But if your child is having any symptom that could be a COVID symptom, which is a lot of them, I would be calling your pediatrician.
Okay, so then if they say they stay home for that day, then the next day they're about to fine, we can just send them and we're not gonna be required to have some paperwork from the doctor or anything like that.
So the way this one reads, your student may return to school under one or more of the conditions: a negative COVID test with documentation, or a diagnosis of a non-COVID condition with documentation, or 10 days have passed since the onset of above symptoms. A clearance note from a medical provider is preferred but not required. So those are the ors, but now there's an and. And it has been at least 3 days since the student has had a fever without the use of fever-reducing medications, or symptoms have resolved and your student is clearly feeling better.
So we do need the doctor's note and we get that.
So this is gonna go up on
Yeah.
the website.
This will be on the website,
These three.
and I can also post the link from New York State requiring the medical note. I know,
So
when,
every time the child coughs or sneezes, we have to keep them home, their doctor knows that that's not cool.
I mean, if you think that it's going to turn to COVID, yeah. And then
We don't think.
What if we don't think it is?
Yeah.
Well, I would call your doctor.
I think the question is, and as the nurse has discretion, and I don't know if you agree, but parents have discretion. So your child gets up not feeling well, and out of abundance of caution, you say, you know what, I'm not going to send them today, and for that we appreciate it very much. But like many kids, later in the day, they're running around and driving you crazy, and they're perfectly fine. I think the question you're asking, then can you bring that child back to school the next day? And my answer is yes.
We have to send a doctor.
I mean, I think as a parent, I don't want to even argue them here.
That's okay.
But I'm a grandparent, and I'm thinking, and you know your kids.
Right.
And
I'm also
trust
telling
you.
The guidance from the state, and I totally understand as a parent the limitations on that. I will clarify it some more. I have a nurses meeting at 2 with Kelly Knabb, the nurse practitioner from Williamsville Feeds. I'll clarify it for her. I'll get back to you guys. No stress.
I think on that too, and I don't know if you cycle it, I think on that too is what we were talking about is just being in constant communication with your doctor, because your doctor is going to like when I call it the pediatrician, you got, I think it's called the triage nurse, then they go through a bunch of questions, and in that situation, then they can tell you, okay, it sounds like you're good to go here, you're good to do this, or you need to come in and see us, or that sort of thing. So I think the doctor communication part is huge for you and your pediatrician.
So maybe they're gonna be sending us like a quick note or like a paper that'll clear us without having to go in.
Absolutely. And if you don't have a parent portal set up with your pediatrician, now is the time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most common things with kids is they wake up and they got a stomachache, a belly hurts. What I will say is that if a student doesn't come into school and you're keeping them home, we're not contacting the health department because the kid didn't come to school that day.
Not well.
So, be the good parents that you are. The kid has a bellyache or, throws up in the morning, but it's fine, you monitor it. But on the other hand, if this is not typical, if this is beyond what you normally see, or it's persistent, then yes. For the sake of you and your family and our family as a school, then please do what needs to be done with your doctor. But like I said, if a student doesn't show up to school and you typically call in like you do at their home, it's not like we're under an obligation to contact the health department and somebody's going to be knocking at your door and saying, show us that COVID kid right now.
Do you set electronic correspondence from the doctor if they don't think it's COVID, they don't make us bring them in?
Yes,
That they just send an email.
absolutely. Just a sec.
And if your child's sick for an extended period of time, how are we doing instruction at home?
Good question. And here's the reality. And it's kind of our hybrid, but it's also, if a student's out of 1 or 2 days, we'll hand it in the same way we have always done. We'll send work home, especially if there's a sibling in the school or someone stops by and get work, that sort of thing. Or if it's a day, depending if they're in, algebra class, it might be different than if they're in preschool and they miss, making, I don't know, whatever middle school kids do or preschool kids do. But for parents, let's say it is going to be an extended period of time that they may be out. What we are doing, in fact, we're experimenting right now by using the computer to tape this. And we put it on the website. So there are a couple of parents who are opting for that. They are continuing to stay enrolled here, but they want us to do that. Now, Do I think that is as good of instruction as if we were completely closed down and we did our Google Classroom? No, it's somewhat limited, although the instruction is going to be different than normal anyways. I mean, I'm not saying that teachers aren't going to move around the room because they have masks on, kids are working silently, they're going to go around and check their work and that sort of thing. So it won't look like a Zoom lesson that you might have seen where the teacher's there and doing all the lesson, because they're going to be witnessing the instruction of the teacher in the front of the room. It's not a camera that's going to follow the teacher around. It's not a camera that's going to be filming your kids, that sort of thing. But that's, at least they'll know what was going on in that class. And then the normal communication you would have with the teacher through email, you would do that. If we were forced to close down, then obviously that sophistication would be that much better by going through Google Classroom.
Go into, I guess, specify a little bit clear, those classes that you cannot provide 6 feet apart between students, like how, are those the classes that those students who can't be 6 feet apart will be providing barriers for their desks?
Yes, that kind of sums it up pretty well. Most of our classes, we are able to get that 6 feet distance, but not all. And in the younger classes where they can, they will be wearing, well, they're going to be wearing masks anyways, but we will rather quickly break those classes in two, and they'll go to, as I said, one of the other locations in the school for a short period of time, and then they switch, and the classes will be fluid that way. But in, let's say, third grade, maybe, there may be desks that will have the polycarbonate barriers around them. And so, not to stigmatize any of the kids, and I don't think it will, I think it would just, we would rotate kids in that as just an extra level of safety. Now, understand the way the guidance or the mandates are written right now, it is
6 feet or
a mask
or
or
so
now,
we think it's better to do AMPs.
yeah, and just so you know that, but we, and when I say we, I mean, both the public schools as well as the diocese, our diocese education department, press state ed on that, and they said it's not our territory, it's the health department. We pressed the health department, and they have been silent on it. Now, my guess is if it continues to get pressed, they'll more than likely err on the side of caution, which said, well, yes. But one of the concessions I have made, and Hannah and I have, we've had to, work on this a little bit between where she's at and where I'm at. And one of the things I think it's important for you to know, this is not the world according to Bob Cluckey. This is not I have my personal thoughts and opinions, just as all of you, but I have the responsibility of all your kids. So what we are doing is not just the way I personally think. And one of the things that Anna and I had to work out was, we know what the mandates are and the way they're currently written, but we also know that whenever we can provide an extra level of safety, we will. And one of the concessions that I made is that kids are going to be wearing masks more often than I originally envisioned. When we originally looked at this plan and we looked at our square footage, by mathematics, you can get 19 kids in a classroom. I'd have some teachers say, I can't put more than 12. How do you, same size classroom? Yeah. So part of the compromise was with teachers saying, you know what? You can't have that nice little reading alcove you had in the corner of the room. You got to make some adjustments. And so, in reality, it's probably more like 16. So if we have 18, we've got 2 kids. And they'll either be rotated through that, or I'd reserve that for any parent who says, you know what, my kid's got significant asthma or whatever. I prefer that they sit there, and we would accommodate us with that as well. in the back.
Is there any sort of possibility that you would make a change to the preschool where they are wearing masks all day and they're in the dividers? Would you ever make it so the preschoolers could take the masks off while they're sitting at the table or something like that? I mean, I know there's a bunch of parents in the class that don't really want their kids wearing masks all day long, so.
We'll do breaks. There is no guidance from New York on what is an actual mask break. So what Dr. Cluckey and I have come up with is at least once, but most likely twice an hour, the kids have 5 minutes off. I think it'll be way more than that, because similar to this, if a teacher is up here lecturing and kids are sitting there, they can have mask breaks the way I kind of described it earlier. When they're outside, if they're maintaining social distance, they have mask breaks.
I think I was asking besides the mask breaks.
No,
No, they're gonna be wearing.
masks need to be on. Yes.
If let's say a kid has tested positive for COVID, they've done their quarantine, they're now back in school, it's month and a half later, they have a fever. Are we going with the CDC guidelines, like if it's better than 3 months since they're positive test, they don't need to get swabbed, or are we swabbing them anyway, or how is that going?
I did see those CDC guidance. I am ready to let Erie County Department of Health handle that. If Erie County says, no, we don't need to swab, we don't need to swab. But I trust the people above me for that. Annie?
I just wanted to say on your question, and just as far as from a teacher's perspective, I know the teachers are doing a lot of planning to take classes outside when they can. You know, if you can do your out loud reading and see the kids in a big circle where they're all spaced, but you know, they can be outside and have masks off. Some of the teachers have opted to have art in their classroom instead of the art room because the kids can be more separated. They can use their own supplies. We're really going to do anything we can to get those kids having the breaks that they need, but also still having the experience that they expect when they come to school. So I think we'll be able to do a lot.
You know, there's a reason you guys chose the school, and it's the teachers. Mr. Shannon?
A couple of questions. Are we thinking about eliminating like that buddy system a little bit, the first thing, and then second, we have to do anything with the governor's mandate about like upgrading air filters and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So it's tough because that was one thing that was really fun about our school, wasn't it? Of, you know, having our 8th grade buddies with our kindergartners. We need to reimagine that. I'm not sure it's been reimagined yet, but we'll come up with something. When our kids walk over to church, that's kind of where I loved our buddy system because I had a big kid with the little ones. It needs to be reimagined still. But no, I'm not going to have kids holding hands crossing the street. We'll figure something else out. I think one of the preschool classes actually bought one of those jump ropes that has like the handles on it that's all 6 feet apart. So at least we still know that there's some safety to it. We'll keep working on that. In terms of the ventilation system, I believe, so my husband is an HVAC, so this is only what I get from him and his guidance. Our capacity is to a MERV 8, I believe, filter. To stop COVID, you need something higher than, I believe, an 11. Our system can't handle that. So we don't have the millions of dollars it's going to take to upgrade our system. So that's why we're bringing as much outside air in. Windows will be open. It will be hot. New York has said that fans are not allowed. So that's why we're really trying to do this outside time as much as we can for September, at least.
I just add a couple things. One, we don't have a forced air system in the school. We're radiant heat. It's radiators basically, and just heat on. So that's a good thing. This is an air conditioner. We do have air circulation. understand what we had said earlier, there are things that change. For example, we had those little standalone air conditioners. And we are still trying to find out exactly how that exchanges air. But what we do know is it doesn't really take out, there's a exhaust on it. That's not a carbon monoxide exhaust, but it's basically taking air from the room, cooling it, and what the hot air is that goes out. So our thinking is on that those aren't really usable, unfortunately. We know that, and Hannah helped me to understand this. I said, well, why opening up the windows? Because if you open the window, especially if there's a little bit of breeze, you are circulating the air. But it makes sense that you're circulating the air with fresh air, and it's basically diluting, if there's COVID in the air, if you will, it will dilute it. So we are still looking for more information with like a window fan. You know, like at a house where you put a fan, and it takes outside air and brings it in. If that would achieve the thing, or if that's just too aggressive, or putting it low. Some answers we simply don't have. But what we do know is that our heating system is radiant heating and not forced air.
Are you guys expecting kids to bring lunch every day?
Oh, yeah, I'm glad it was on my list. Lunch will be completely different. It will be prepackaged meals in a box or styrofoam. So it can easily be taken up to rooms if they're going to do that. But it's also the requirement by the health department. You know, we're not going to scoop out the mashed potatoes and then the carrots and then the turkey and gravy. It all has to be prepackaged for the kids. So that has all been arranged for lunch. So and I don't know. Oh, cafeteria monitors. Yes, we're still going to need them because we may have less than 36 kids in the cafeteria, but we're still going to have 20 to 30 kids there. And we would need the extra hand to help, because obviously after those kids leave, those desks would have to be, wiped down and cleaned before the next group comes in.
Let me touch on something else really fast. For the classrooms that will have lunch in their classrooms, they all are at their individual desks. It will be wiped down afterwards. So food allergies have been a concern of mine. That's kept me up at night. Our classrooms right now are not free. And would I love to see that enforced all the time? Yeah, I really would. But I also am a parent and I understand what kids eat and what they don't eat. So Dr. Cluckey and I are still going back and forth on if there are allergies within the classroom, does the whole classroom need to be nut free, for example? That's an ongoing discussion.
And certainly part of that discussion is to what extent.
Right.
I mean, I have a granddaughter who has a certain nut allergy, not all nut, but it's not airborne. Kid could be, eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich next to her. It's not good. But that's different than kids who have a high degree of sensitivity. If they touch, there's some peanut butter smeared on here, touch it, and they have a reaction. So it could come, and one area that there is, we're completely on board. If any student's health or well-being is in jeopardy because of any kind of allergy, it doesn't have to just be nuts. I mean, but that's the one most common in schools, but there are plenty of others. We'll do everything we can and work with the families in that classroom. And again, given the place where we are, given who we are, I have absolute 100% confidence that while it might be an inconvenience for us, that if you can keep a kid healthy and safe, I have no doubt that there's not a parent in this room that would say, wow, my kid's going to have a peanut butter jelly sandwich come hell or high water. You're not going to do that. But on the other hand, we're not also, and this is where discretion comes in. If a parent of the child just says, can we just safeguard that my kid's not eating? I mean, they're not going to be, even more so than before. I think it's more dangerous before when they're in a cafeteria, a kid had to get a Nutty Buddy, and we don't necessarily know. So again, the importance of letting us know, particularly for any new parents that are with us, if you have any of those concerns, please let Hannah know, because we'll work with you, but we need to know.
This question, I apologize, is not like COVID related, but this is much based on something you mentioned in the beginning. For our preschoolers, are we gonna, like one period, are we gonna be able to walk our kids to their classrooms for day school?
Yes, and just quickly, there's an entrance. Not most kids come in. Usually the buses come in this door. Normal drop-offs are here, but preschool is down the door by the alcove. What you'll do is you'll come in, and we'll have tape on the floor. You'll go by the room. There'll be an adult out there. We'll take your child, backpack, whatever they have, and then you continue on and go out the other door. So we keep everyone moving in the same direction, and we don't create congestion, because that's really what we're trying to avoid, is congestion. And you know, it used to be a time I'd love, because I'd hang down there and talk to the parents, and it's my chance to do that. But under these conditions, we just can't do it. Kindergarten as well, but they'll come in the front door here and go right to the room. Now, kindergarten, and we'll do it in layers. Kindergarten, much quicker, where they should be coming into the classroom by themselves. Drop them at the door. We always have adults out here in the foyer. There'll be more this year because we're going to have more drop-offs than before. And again, if we have particularly in the beginning, kids are a little worried and scared. We're all looking like bandits and stuff like that. But hopefully your kids are out in public seeing it, so that I know my grandkids are quite used to the routine when they go into a store and that sort of thing. But yes, we'd like to curtail that as quick as possible, but we know that there's different comfort levels with that. Again, we'll work with it.
Okay, so just going off of these questions. So I have 3 kids. They're all going to different areas and levels. So like I have a little one that's in kindergarten, the other ones are going to kindergarten. So first, can you just talk about the protocol? Like I know we've been talking a lot about the pre-K. Like I'm just confused on like what's going on throughout the day for the little ones. So basically, where to play, like how long are they going to be? Especially like September's so hot. Are they going to be outside a lot playing so that they don't have to wear the mask? What's the plan for like the little ones, even kindergarten?
I mean, outside, the gym, cafeteria, splitting them up. I mean, if you have split them in half, you can separate them more. And a mask break doesn't just, you have to mean, okay, you stand there or sit there and take the mask off. It could be in an activity. I mean, the teachers are really terrific about activities. And as Hannah said, they can, play with the same toys. If they're kicking a ball across the gym to each other, all separated out, they can do that. And they without a mask for a period of time. But then they wash their hands constantly, and before they go to the next activity, so they'll rather quickly learn, when it's appropriate, when it's not. One of the things that we don't know is the mask tolerance on any individual, regardless of their grade or age, or is there consistent, tolerance difference between the very young and the older? I don't know. I mean, I see it in the summer school programs that have been going on, and my grandkids have been in them, and they seem to be handling it. But know that we will adjust it in the safest way possible if there's a problem. We got to be fluid with what we do. But what I keep going back to and fighting the urge to be normal, if you will, is despite the kind of work our teachers did during the shutdown, I justify it by saying, well, I can't stand this because I want kids running around yelling and screaming and doing all that. It is still better than if they're home 5 days a week. And so we all, including myself, who's been here all summer with hardly anybody in the building, in an office with a window, and being very comfortable, know that I have to up my own game in wearing the mask and more often. I do truly believe that it'll become second nature rather quickly.
Will you give information on the 7:30 to 8, how that procedure is going to go?
Yes, we're still having the before school program. I ask you that it's not become overwhelming. And if you can drop your kids off at 8 o'clock, please do so. Only because I don't have all the staff. I mean, I can move more people to 7:30, but it means they have to go home earlier at the end of the day. So we still have the early drop off, but I'm asking that 8 o'clock, because 8 o'clock is the normal starting time for our faculty and staff. They know they need to be in the room. It's where the buses are dropping kids off, and we don't have a large number of holding. We'll probably be doing that in the gym. The gym is mostly going to have desks and chairs in it that can easily be put aside if we want to do an activity, but we can use it as a flex space. Same thing with the cafeteria. The only time it's not is when it's going to be, for the lunchtime, which I'm trying my best to keep the 3 lunches that we have, but I'll go to a 4th if I have to reduce that density. But I think we can do it on a rotational basis.
I have one going into kindergarten readiness and one going into first grade. And I know that the kindergarten readiness ends a little bit sooner than the rest of the school. Will my first graders still be able to come and get my daughter in kindergarten readiness to then bring them out, or how's it?
Yeah, what we have done, and I'm not saying that why we couldn't do that before. When you have a preschooler with a school age student, is they all come down and we get the kids out the door with the parents. And then once they have an older sibling, we take them separately and wait until, it's pretty close. We just get them out a little bit sooner so that primarily so the cars are clear as quickly before the school age parents start coming in. So yes.
My office is right next to that. So what I see during the day is your kindergarten readiness student will probably be in the classroom with the teacher's aide still. And then when K through 8 dismisses, your first grader can come down and grab it, or we can just meet out front. But we're pretty flexible, and we'll make it work how it needs to work.
Okay.
How does the state feel about the face shield? Is it mask only, or?
Face shield is not an acceptable covering. You have to wear a mask. If for some reason your student cannot wear a mask, I'll need a doctor's note, and then I will still be requiring the face shield.
It is an extra layer, and again, if
you want to wear both,
you want to wear it,
go ahead.
Well, I was thinking,
but it's not in lieu of.
Yeah.
I was thinking you have an issue with kindergarten, and you have a mask break, but then you put the face shield on.
Yeah. During a mask break, a shield would be a fine alternative.
Or if he needs extra breaks, is what I'm saying, other than the rest of the classroom.
Yeah, I think that's a nice possible solution.
Are you going to have any kind of plan for arrival and dismissal procedures so that the kids can maintain social distancing?
There will be procedures, but will we be able to maintain social distancing throughout that? I couldn't in good conscience tell you that. Now, we're not going to allow kids to congregate for long periods of time, but when they get off a bus, it pulls up. Usually our kids are 6, 7, 8, and there's a couple buses, like Clarence buses, that they combine. You might get 10, 15 kids coming off that bus. They should have masks on when they're in that bus and when they come in. Just remember the reg, if you will, is that it's 6 feet, mask if you can't stay within 6 feet. We're taking the extra precaution that we're expecting masks even when we are 6 feet or more away as we are here, but being understanding and liberal about the breaks that you need. So yes, a kid's gonna come in
Mrs. Leibler,
close to each other.
I was at the bus garage this morning in Clarence to meet with the bus drivers. So, and a full-size bus, you can only put 24 kids on that now. So they're already hugely social distanced. When a kid gets on the bus now, they go right, so say you're the first kid on the bus, you go to the back. Your assigned seat is the back now. And so when the more kids that get on, you filter up. The kids in the front obviously get off the bus first. They will have their masks on the whole time. So when they come off, it is slowly. Siblings can sit together on the bus. They don't need to be 6 feet apart. But I know at least Clarence drivers are going to be very careful of, hold on, wait a minute. Those kids are not off yet. You need to wait. If Clarence is doing that, I am sure Williamsville and Lancaster and Alden and Akron are all doing the same.
So we do anticipate the morning will take a little bit longer. We're probably going to adjust class time, so at the end of the day, if there's some merit, we're still debating it, to end class a little early, so we basically go back to a homeroom again. They'll gather up. That will probably change, particularly as it gets closer to winter, and with our younger kids, getting boots and coats and hats, and even our older kids who, in a typical middle school, if you let them, particularly the boys, let them wear shorts all year long, they do it. But if we're going outside, we're going to be pressing these kids dress accordingly.
Yes, I mean, question is more so dismissal when all the kids are coming from their classroom. How are you going to avoid having a dismissal at one time so we're all walking together?
Well, right now, we don't dismiss all at once. I'll admit it gets pretty loosey-goosey by the end of the year. But that will be tightened up. Typically, we dismiss with the car riders come down, and then you have, like, if we hold them in a room and we see that Lancaster, bus is out there, call them down at that time. So just those kids are coming down and going.
I think we're still working on that, but the other option is we'll have the cafeteria. So instead of the pickup kids all being in the front hallway, maybe they're going to sit with their sibling in the cafeteria. And okay, I see Mrs. Leibler's car. Gabby, let's go. There's a lot to work out, so but we'll get there.
And we are. I'm keeping the PD part, if you will, the typical. We have to do, as you know, the right to know, the sexual harassment stuff, and the obligatory speaking. But I'm going to try and keep that to a minimum, because our teachers will have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then that Tuesday, because other than preschool doing the drop-offs through the window and stuff like that, to help us to help them to prepare all that sort of protocol. I know some of my colleagues aren't starting school until that 14th. We chose not to because I'd rather use the 3 days where there'll be some instruction, but it won't be because it's really just getting used to it and working out any of those things. If we recognize that we have pinch points that we need to address, we will. And that's how I plan to utilize the teacher partners as well.
I have a nurses meeting to go to. Any other questions for me?
What if they have a COVID antibody?
Doesn't really mean much.
I mean, if they show that they've had COVID and they're through it.
They've been exposed and they've developed antibodies against
I don't know what it means, but I'm thinking it's a good thing because
It's a wonderful thing.
we
Unfortunately,
probably
it doesn't
need more
help us
people
much.
like that, but we're not going to volunteer everybody else's kids to do it. But if it happens, it's great, I guess.
Just to touch on that, because my kids both had COVID, I had it, and then at the hospital. They both swabbed positive, I had positive, my husband across the board. Like nothing, and the antibodies don't circulate in the system forever, so even a negative test of exposed or didn't have it, so that's why it's kind of like.
Yeah, conventional wisdom is more of us have had it and never knew it, but it is interesting. We, right now, and correct me medical folks, but, I read what you read too, that if you've had it, you're not less likely to get it, but that's not conclusive.
Right, that's the end.
If I have medication or just some form, should I send them in or drop them off?
Why don't you email me or call me and we can either set up a personal time. I'm here. I've been here all summer. Yeah, we'll work it out. I prefer you don't just send it in with your student.
Yeah.
One of the best things I have, my window's right on the back parking lot. So honest to God, I just pop out my screen and take things. We'll make it work.
I do appreciate, I'll be honest, there's not an administrator alive that looks forward to these meetings, because you never know what you're going to have. I do appreciate your patience and your understanding, and know that we will always remain consistent with what I think we do. We will do whatever we can to help you and your child feel more comfortable and safe, when they're here. And I personally want to thank you for, I don't want to sound corny, but I mean, we're all in this together, and we'll see how things progress. I have a great deal of optimism. I think, we haven't even touched upon the importance to the mental health, physical health of kids being in school. And that certainly is a factor we weigh in here. And to see your kids when we did during the spring and then during the summer, we're doing this appropriately and as safely as possible. I never guarantee anybody that, nobody's ever going to get it, and, I'd be lying, but this is good. So thank you.
Email
See
me with
you in
whatever.
September. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I will be back at school after my meeting.
Thanks.